everyone, and welcome back. For today's deep dive, we're going to be talking all about success.
Ooh, success.
But not like the usual money and fame kind of success.
Yeah.
We're going to be going a little bit deeper
Yeah.
and looking at what it really means to thrive in business, in work, and in relationships.
Yeah, it's fascinating how we often limit ourselves with these really narrow definitions of success, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the sources that we have for you guys today, I think are going to be really intriguing.
Yeah.
Because it's a mix of lecture notes and then also like real world stories and then even some psychology sprinkled in there.
Yeah, it's a really cool blend to kind of connect the dots between what's happening out there and then our own lives.
So our mission for today is we really want to help you guys grasp what really fuels success in these different areas of life.
Okay.
But we also want to look at those situations where things just feel unfair or inconsistent.
Yeah, because life isn't always a level playing field, is it?
Not at all. And speaking of playing fields, one of the sources even uses Steve Jobs as an example.
Oh, wow.
So think about it. Incredible business success, revolutionized entire industries, but his personal life was a bit rocky, shall we say.
It makes you wonder if there are different, currencies for success in different areas of life.
Yeah.
You know, what works in one place might not work in another.
So how do these sources define success? Because they look at business work relationships, kind of the usual suspects.
Yeah, but they bring in this really interesting psychological angle,
Mm-hmm.
and they talk about Maslow's self-actualization,
Okay.
which is, this need to feel truly fulfilled, as opposed to just hitting these kind of external targets.
So it's not just about having a big bank account and climbing the corporate ladder.
You got it.
There's something more.
Yeah, and imagine you hit all of those typical markers of success, but you still feel empty inside.
Yeah.
The sources are suggesting that true fulfillment, it comes from aligning your actions with your values, finding meaning in your work, cultivating those strong relationships.
That makes sense. So going back to Steve Jobs,
Yeah.
was he truly successful?
Right.
If he was this genius innovator,
Right.
but maybe struggled to connect with people on a deeper level?
That's such a complex question.
Yeah.
And it really highlights how our definitions of success can evolve over time, too.
Oh, okay.
Early in our careers, we might prioritize those professional achievements.
Yeah.
But as we mature our focus, it might shift towards personal fulfillment and those meaningful connections.
It's like realizing that there's more than one game to be won,
Yes.
and the rule book changes as you go.
Right. And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Because the sources bring in Pierre Bourdieu's concept of cultural capital,
Right.
which is basically how your background and your connections, they impact what you're able to achieve.
So wait, it's not just about hard work and talent.
Those are important.
Yeah.
But Bourdieu is arguing that our social networks, our upbringing, our access to certain resources, they also play a huge role. Imagine trying to climb that corporate ladder when success depends more on who you know than what you know.
Wow. That's kind of a sobering thought.
It is.
Does everyone really have an equal shot at success, or are some people just starting out with like a bigger advantage?
It's a really great question to consider.
Yeah.
And it actually
But-
leads us into this idea of fairness,
Okay.
or the lack thereof,
Right.
which shows up in the sources quite a bit.
I think we've all experienced those situations where the rules just seem different for different people, like getting in trouble or getting judged more harshly for making the same mistake as someone else.
It's so frustrating.
It is.
And there's actually a psychological explanation for that.
Okay.
Our brains are wired with these things called cognitive biases.
Oh, yeah.
Like the fundamental attribution error.
I've heard of that.
Basically, we tend to judge other people more harshly than we judge ourselves.
Oh, for sure. Okay, let me give you a concrete example.
Okay.
Think about a time when you messed up at work.
Oh, yeah.
Did you blame yourself entirely, or did you maybe think, well, the deadline was unrealistic, or I didn't have all the information I needed?
Right. We often give ourselves the benefit of the doubt,
Yeah.
We attribute those mistakes to external factors.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of protecting our ego.
For sure. But then when a coworker makes the same mistake,
Uh-huh.
are we as forgiving?
Probably not.
Probably not, right? Do we give them that same benefit of the doubt?
We're more likely to assume they messed up because of some internal flaw. Like they're careless or incompetent.
Totally. It's like we're using different measuring sticks.
Different standards.
And this isn't just happening in our heads. This is playing out in the real world all the time.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Double standards are baked into systems and power structures.
Uh-huh.
Think about gender discrimination in the workplace.
Hmm.
One of the sources cites Heilman's 2012 study showing that women in leadership roles get criticized for the same assertive behavior that gets men praised.
Oh,
So a woman speaks up confidently, she's labeled as bossy.
right.
A man does the same thing, he's seen as a strong leader.
Ugh, it's infuriating.
It's so infuriating. It really highlights how those ingrained biases can shape our perceptions and then lead to unequal treatment.
Yeah.
This is making me think, where else do these double standards pop up?
Hmm.
Are they in our families, in our friend groups, maybe even in our own internal judgments?
Right.
There's a lot to unpack.
And that unpacking is crucial because recognizing those double standards, both within ourselves and the systems around us, is the first step towards creating a more equitable and just world.
For sure. It's funny because when you were talking about those double standards, it kind of made me think about those times when we're the ones holding the uneven measuring sticks. Even if we don't realize it, like maybe we judge ourselves really harshly for one thing, but then we totally let ourselves off the hook for something else that's pretty similar.
That's such a good point. And it actually connects to another idea that comes up quite a bit in the sources.
Okay.
Cognitive dissonance. Have you heard that?
Oh, yeah.
It's that uncomfortable feeling that we get when our actions don't quite match up with our beliefs.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like that feeling when you preach about sustainability, but then you find yourself, buying single-use plastics all the time just because it's convenient.
Exactly. It's that inner conflict.
Right.
It's the tension between what we say we value and how we actually behave.
Right.
And the sources explain that psychologically, we're kind of wired to try and reduce that tension.
So we come up with excuses.
Yeah, like it's just one plastic bottle.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. Or I'm way too busy to walk to the recycling bin.
We rationalize it.
Totally. We minimize.
Yeah.
We try to make those inconsistencies feel a little less jarring. And one of the sources, Leon Festinger, he actually developed a whole theory about this back in 1957.
A whole theory dedicated to our inner turmoil.
I know, right?
We humans are good at contradicting ourselves.
Well, it's not always a conscious thing. It's often this subconscious attempt to protect our self-image and just avoid that icky feeling of being a hypocrite.
Okay, so let's take it out of our own heads for a second and think about this on a bigger scale.
Okay.
The sources bring up the Volkswagen emissions scandal.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
As kind of a prime example of cognitive dissonance in action. So you have this company that's touting its eco-friendly image.
Right.
But then behind the scenes, they're actively cheating on those emissions tests.
Yeah. A classic case of trying to maintain two completely conflicting realities.
Right. On the surface, they're the green car company, but in the background, it's a totally different story.
Yeah. And for a while, they managed to pull it off.
Yeah, but the truth comes out.
It always does.
And then the damage is huge. You have loss of trust, lawsuits, financial hits.
It really goes to show that ignoring those inconsistencies, it can have serious consequences.
Yeah.
Whether it's in our personal lives, our careers, or even at an organizational level.
So I kind of want to pause here for a second.
Okay.
And ask you, the listener, a question.
Okay.
Have you ever been in a situation where your actions just didn't align with your values? Maybe at work, in a relationship, or even just in your day-to-day choices.
Think about how that felt.
Yeah.
Did you try to justify it?
Yeah.
Did you kind of sweep it under the rug?
All right.
Or did you take steps to really bridge that gap between your belief and your behavior?
It's definitely food for thought, because if we're really aiming for this fulfilling version of success, shouldn't that include striving for alignment and integrity in all areas of our lives?
Absolutely. And that brings us to this really crucial question.
Okay.
How do we actually navigate all of this complexity?
Yeah.
We've talked about double standards. We've talked about cognitive dissonance.
Right.
But what can we actually do about it?
Right, because it feels like these issues are kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
Is there a way to create a more level playing field to reduce those inconsistencies, or at least learn how to deal with them in a healthy way?
The good news is that the sources offer some really practical takeaways.
Oh, good.
For tackling these challenges.
Okay, I'm all ears.
And I think you'll find them surprisingly applicable to both your professional and personal life.
Okay, so what's the secret sauce?
Well, one of the major points that they emphasize is the importance of transformational and authentic leadership.
Okay.
Leaders who really walk the talk, embodying the values they preach.
Right.
They can create this ripple effect throughout an organization, fostering this culture of accountability and integrity.
So it's not enough to just talk about fairness and ethical behavior. You have to actually live it out.
Exactly. Think of someone like Satya Nadella.
Oh, yeah.
who completely transformed Microsoft's culture.
Yeah.
He shifted the focus from this cutthroat competition to collaboration and empathy. And that had a huge impact on the company's success.
That's a powerful example. So aside from finding amazing leaders, what else can we do to address these issues?
The sources also highlight the importance of mastering conflict resolution skills.
Okay.
Especially when those double standards or inconsistencies pop up.
Right.
Instead of getting defensive or resorting to blame, they suggest adopting what they call an interest-based relational approach.
Okay, break that down for me. What does that actually look like in practice?
So imagine an employee who feels like they're being held to a different standard than their colleagues.
Okay.
Instead of complaining or gossiping, they could use this approach to initiate a conversation with their manager.
So they would focus on shared goals and finding a solution that works for everyone involved.
Exactly. It's about shifting the dynamic from me versus you to us working together to solve this problem.
Right.
And the sources suggest that this could be incredibly effective in resolving conflicts and just creating a more harmonious work environment.
It's like taking that emotional intelligence that we talked about before.
Yes.
And applying it to real-world situations.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a little bit to the business world.
Okay.
The sources also stress the importance of prioritizing ethics and social responsibility.
So not just empty promises and press stunts. Companies need to actually walk the walk.
Absolutely. It's about implementing policies and practices that reflect those stated values. Things like diversity training to combat unconscious bias.
Okay.
Ethical sourcing of materials, promoting transparency in decision-making.
So real, tangible actions that demonstrate a genuine commitment to ethical behavior.
Exactly. And it's not just about avoiding those scandals like we saw with Volkswagen.
Yeah.
It's about building trust with your employees, your customers, and the community as a whole.
And that trust is ultimately what contributes to long-term success, right?
Absolutely. Now, on a more personal level, the sources emphasize the power of self-regulation and personal integrity.
So being aware of our own biases and then holding ourselves accountable for our actions. Exactly.
It's this ongoing process of self-reflection and course correction.
Right.
We're all works in progress.
Yeah.
But the key is to strive for consistency between our beliefs and our actions.
Right.
Even when it's challenging.
Because sometimes being the change you want to see is the path to success.
Precisely. We can't control everything.
Right.
But we can control how we respond to these inconsistencies.
Yeah.
We can choose to challenge double standards, advocate for fairness, and act with integrity.
It's like that famous quote, be the change you wish to see in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah, it really does all come back to that idea, doesn't it? Like, we can sit around and wait for the world to change, or we can step up and be a part of that change ourselves.
I love that.
Okay, so before we wrap up this deep dive, I kind of want to recap some of the key takeaways.
Okay.
We started off today by exploring how success isn't this, one-size-fits-all concept.
Right.
It's got all these different dimensions, like your business goals, personal fulfillment relationships, and they don't always play nicely together.
It's messy.
Yeah. And that's when things get really interesting.
Yeah.
We talked about Steve Jobs as an example, who found incredibly success in the business world, but maybe struggled in his personal life.
Yeah, I think that's a really good illustration.
It just highlights how different areas of life might require different approaches and different priorities.
For sure, like different currencies for success.
Exactly. And then we dove into those fascinating psychological concepts like double standards and cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
It's important to recognize those double standards both in the world around us and then also in our own thinking.
Yeah.
Because it can really help us navigate those situations where things feel unfair or inconsistent.
For sure.
And understanding cognitive dissonance, that urge to kind of justify our actions even when they clash with our values, that can help us make more conscious and more aligned choices.
Totally.
And the good news is we're not powerless when it comes to these challenges. The sources that we looked at offered some really practical advice.
Yeah.
We talked about the importance of transformational leadership, those leaders who inspire by example,
right,
creating a culture of integrity and accountability.
Yeah, leading from the front.
And then we talked about conflict resolution skills, using that interest-based relational approach to find common ground and solutions that work for everyone.
Well, I like that one.
And on a larger scale, we talked about how businesses can prioritize ethics and social responsibility.
Right.
It's not just lip service, but it's taking real action to implement change.
Yeah, it's about walking the walk.
Exactly. And then most importantly, I think we talked about the power of personal integrity.
Yes.
Being aware of our own biases, holding ourselves accountable, and striving for alignment between our beliefs and our actions.
It's a continuous journey.
It really is. So, listener, as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final question to ponder. If true success is about more than just those external achievements, what's one thing that you can do today to move closer to a more fulfilling definition of success for yourself? It could be a small step, a big decision, or just a shift in perspective.
It's up to you.
It is. Remember, the journey is yours to create.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.